If you are part of the LGBTQ plus umbrella and you're looking for some advice and information about hysterectomy, this video is for you. Hi, my name's Anna. I had a hysterectomy last year when I was 51 years old because I had a large fibroid, which I'll share a bit more about. And I identify as queer, as a lesbian. And when I was looking for information and resources to inform myself about hysterectomy, I found some really helpful information, but pretty much all of it was aimed at heterosexual women. It was aimed at people who conform to gender norms, and it was really helpful, but I didn't feel it spoke to me a lot of the time. I really struggled to find any representation for queer and lesbian people. I didn't find anyone who looked like me or who spoke about the things that mattered to me when they were talking about their hysterectomy experience. So that's why I'm here, because I couldn't find what I was looking for, and I suspect I'm not the only one. So I wanted to make this video so if you are queer, lesbian, looking for information or advice or just some sense of you're not the only one going through hysterectomy, then I hope this video will be helpful for you. So I'm going to talk about a few different things. The decision I made to have the hysterectomy, how that came about, and some of the factors that went into the decision that was made. Preparing for surgery, going through the surgery and being in hospital, and then coming home from hospital and my recovery journey, which is still ongoing. So if any of that sounds like it could be helpful for you, stay tuned. I've got some notes because I've got quite a lot that I want to share. But I will also put some timestamps in the video. And if I talk about things that you can buy or that I found helpful, you don't necessarily have to buy them all. You probably have got a lot of these things already. But I'll put links where appropriate so you can click through for more information. You'll find all of that in the details below the video. I've got my cat, behind me. So if you see her moving around, that she's just having a wee stretch. She might come and bother me in a while. So let me tell you a little bit about me and how I came to have a hysterectomy at age 51. So I had a large fibroid. I'd had this fibroid for several years. It was steadily growing, and then it had a real growth spurt in the last sort of couple of years, and it ended up at being about 10 centimetres across, which they say is sort of the size of a large grapefruit. And it weighed around, I know how much it weighed because I asked for the measurements after it had come out of me, but it weighed around 600 grams, which maybe doesn't sound that much, but the problem for me was that this large fibroid was basically pressing on my bladder. So it was pressing on my bladder, and it was also putting a lot of pressure on my lower back and onto my sort of right side, so sort of right ovary round there. So I had a lot of pain. I would be sitting with a hot water bottle clamped to me pretty much every evening. I needed to wee constantly because of the pressure on my bladder. And that made it really difficult to go anywhere or do anything. I was always thinking, oh gosh, how long can I be out for before I'm going to need to find a toilet? It made, I love going for long walks, but I couldn't do that without thinking, oh, there's not going to be any loos en route and how am I going to cope? And then the pain in my lower back also meant that my body had started sort of twisting to compensate for the pain, and my mobility was decreasing as well. So I was in a bit of a sorry state. My life basically felt like it had really shrunk down. I didn't like to leave the house. I wasn't feeling confident about going out in the world and doing all the things I wanted to do because of the pain and because of this urinary urgency. And I had some scans on my fibroid. It turned out that it's a degenerating one, which means that they kind of start to shrink as they grow too big for their blood supply, but then they start to grow again. And so I was in this sort of like cycle of pain, basically. And I couldn't continue like that. I just felt like my quality of life had really deteriorated. But I didn't want to have surgery. I didn't want to have to go through having a hysterectomy. So I put it off and life just wasn't getting any better. I should add as well that I was 51 when I had my hysterectomy. I hadn't gone through menopause. I was perimenopausal. I was still having periods occasionally. So there was like cyclical stuff still going on for me as well. And yeah, everything just felt unpredictable, quite scary, limiting, restrictive. I didn't want to have sex. It was just like not a good way to be living. So I made the decision to have the hysterectomy after doing a lot of research, talking to people I knew who'd had them, doing a lot of online reading and looking at resources. I also spoke to the consultant that I was referred to. So the key questions that I had, and I think these are quite helpful if you are in the position where you're going to be talking to a consultant about the decision to have a hysterectomy and what that might actually involve, because there are different types. So the key question I had was this going to have to be open surgery, where they do the cut along the lower belly or vertically down the belly to remove everything. Could it be done keyhole laparoscopically, which is where they just make the little incisions and they go in with keyhole instruments, and then they still have to extract it. And the way they usually do it then is through the vagina, so a vaginal hysterectomy. I'm not a medical expert, so you can read more about the medical details of these, but basically the question is your uterus gonna come out through your vagina? Is it gonna come out through an incision in your belly? Those are the two big decisions. And for me, that decision was kind of made because my fibroid was so big, so it was kind of, chunky. That wasn't going to come out of me any other way than through open surgery. The other decision I had to make was around my cervix. So was I going to keep my cervix or was I not going to keep my cervix? And I think maybe different consultants, different surgeons have different views on this. My view was, if it's okay, then I want to keep it. And because I was having the open extraction, I didn't have to have everything pulled out through my cervix and through my vagina. So I chose to keep my cervix. That does mean that I still have to have cervical smears regularly. And also for me, there was also a sense of that was going to make my healing and recovery easier. So when you have your cervix removed, they have to make what they call a vaginal cuff, which is basically, if you imagine your vagina as a tube, where they cut everything away. They then have to stitch up the top of the vagina, which they call a vaginal cuff. And that can take a while to heal. And yeah, I mean, again, you can find out more about this. But when you keep your cervix, the cut is sort of like on the other side of the cervix. So you've got almost like a buffer between where everything's been cut away and the outside access to the outside world. And I also wanted to keep my cervix because I was concerned about sexual pleasure. And if I lost my cervix, was that going to impact on my sexual pleasure or not? I asked my consultant about this, and he said that generally speaking, because women get their sexual pleasure through external stimulation, he didn't think that the cervix had much to do with sexual pleasure. But I think this is a very individual thing, and you may want to factor that into your decision making if it's an option, which it was for me. And then there was also a question about whether to keep my ovaries or not. So I had a lot of pain around my right ovary. I'd had a lot of cysts on that ovary for many years, and I think this is my perception, that my fibroid was kind of putting pressure on my ovary all the time. So it was sort of like pushing up against it and causing pain. And I just had this feeling that if I went through the surgery and kept that ovary and then still had pain, I was going to feel really disheartened. So although my right ovary was healthy, I made the decision for it to be removed along with my uterus, because I was concerned about future pain, future cyst pain from that. And I did, in fact, end up having my uterus removed, my fallopian tubes, and my right ovary. So all that's left is my left ovary and my cervix, and everything else was taken away. So I have a partner, female partner, and she came with me to talk to the surgeon when we were making the decision about what was going to happen. And I feel comfortable and confident talking about sex, but I know that not everybody will. Also for me, like my uterus and everything, I don't have kids. I'd never wanted to have kids. So I never thought of that as my reproductive organs. I always thought of it as like being part of my sexual self, and an important part of my sexual self. I write about sexuality, which is why I'm like confident talking about it, and partly why I wanted to make this video as well. So I write about sexual pleasure, basically, and desire and all those kind of things. So I was concerned about, would having a hysterectomy impact my libido? Would it impact my sexual function? And I did ask the surgeon these things. This was where I started to come up against a lot of the assumed heterosexual, cisgender, gender norms thinking, because the surgeon said to me that it was only really an issue. Hysterectomy was only really an issue with heterosexual penetrative sex. That was his view. And I didn't pursue it, but I wasn't sure if he was meaning, so are you just meaning penetrative sex? Was he assuming that myself and my partner don't have penetrative sex? Or is it something about the act of penetrative sex between a penis and a vagina that is more of an issue when it comes to hysterectomy? I never quite cleared that one up, but it certainly, even at that moment, at that early stage of the process, I was already beginning to think, oh, there are a lot of assumptions made about people having hysterectomies, a lot of assumptions about them being cisgender, heterosexual, in relationship with a man, sexual relationship with a man. And just these sort of thoughts began to stir up something in me, which has also led to creating this video and some other writing around the topic, which I'll tell you a bit more about soon. So once I decided to have the decision, of course, then there's a waiting time, a waiting list, depending on what country you're in and what the healthcare system looks like for you. So I'm in the UK, but obviously if you're paying if you have private health insurance or private health care, then the waiting time may be different for you. But as part of my preparation for surgery, this is when I started really doing a lot of research and information seeking. What was it going to be like? What did I need to do to prepare myself? How was it going to be afterwards? All those kind of questions. I went on a little bit of a shopping spree to try and prepare for any and every eventuality. And some of the things that I found helpful that I'm going to share with you, because again, if you're in this stage where you're thinking about it, or you're waiting, or you're preparing, these are some things that you might want to think about to get yourself ready. So obviously there's a lot of psychological and emotional things that you might want to do to help prepare you, depending on what the relationship you have with your uterus is. So as I said, for me, like, it was never about reproduction. There's never a sense of this is what makes me a woman, or this is my femininity, or if I lose this part of me, am I going to lose the essence of who I am as a woman, I guess, whatever your gender identity might be. And of course, for some people, it's really gender affirming care. So, losing the uterus can be really gender affirming. But for me, I needed to do something that around preparing, I guess, like my psyche for losing a part of my body. I've already lost a few parts of my body. I had my tonsils and adenoids out when I was a kid. I had my gallbladder removed about 5 years ago. And so this was it's just felt like, oh God, it's another part of me which I'm going to have to relinquish that's diseased or isn't doing so well, and I need to let go of. And so there was for me, there was like some emotional stuff around that, more so than what my uterus might symbolize or signify to me. And then there was also the thing for me, which is around what's it going to mean for my sex life? How am I going to feel as a sexual person? And so again, I did some emotional work. I mean, for me, this is just journaling and writing about it. But you know, other people might want to talk to someone, a counsellor or a friend or a trusted person that you feel you can talk to about anything that's coming up for you. Then the practical things. So as I say, I went on a bit of a shopping spree and I got myself some things that I didn't already have. One of which was a wedge pillow for sleeping in bed. So I didn't get a particularly high one. I think it was about 8 inches at the deepest part, and then it goes into a wedge. It's made of memory foam. And I got this to lie on in bed. So if I couldn't lie completely flat, I had something that would just prop me up a little bit. I found that particularly helpful. And again, I'll talk more about this, but I found that particularly helpful for daytime naps. I also got a V-shaped pillow, again, for sitting up in bed or for sitting on the sofa, just to give my body a bit more support and to feel a bit more held, a bit more comfortable. I bought some nighties, and this was another moment where I was like, oh, this doesn't really feel like me. So I don't wear dresses, I don't wear skirts, I don't wear nighties, I wear pajamas, I wear trousers. There was something about having to go and buy nighties that just felt quite feminine and not me. But I was very aware that after surgery, having anything constrictive around my waist was going to be uncomfortable. And I wanted to prioritise my comfort. So I got myself half a dozen nighties, so I could change them as often as I needed. I mean, they're just sort of like long t-shirty things, but I could change them as often as I needed. They were easy to wash and dry, and I was comfortable in bed, and that was hugely important. One of the pieces of information that I gleaned when I was preparing, again, that was very sort of cishet normative, was a hint which said, women, after your hysterectomy, stay in your nightie in the daytime so your children and husband remember that you are recovering from surgery, and don't assume that you'll be able to do all the things. They don't assume that you'll be able to do all the things you usually do for them. Yeah, so I got some nighties. I also got some really comfortable knickers. Again, I was conscious of not wanting anything constrictive or that would press or hurt my tummy, my belly. Here in the UK, Marks and Spencer's do a range called Flexi Fit, which is like, oh, it's an amazing fabric. It's really soft, but they stay up. They don't grip, but they stay up. Don't know quite how they do it, but they were a godsend. Really comfy knickers for post-op. Got some peppermint tea, set up a bed in the spare room so I wouldn't disturb my partner at night time. I also prepared what I called an activity basket. So I filled a basket with books, some cross stitch that I thought I was going to do, colouring in books, pens, pencils, things that I thought might entertain me or keep me occupied. I'll tell you a bit more about that later as well. But yeah, I just tried to kind of prepare practically, physically, and also emotionally for going in for the surgery. And the other thing I did, again, because I write, because I journal, it's like a really helpful thing for me, was I made sure I wrote down my why. Why am I having this hysterectomy? Why am I going through this? And it was like a reminder to myself of how it had been at the worst times and why this was the right time to have the surgery and why I needed to do it, just in case I got the wobbles, in case I ever had that moment of, I don't want to do it, or not wanting to go through with it. It was like my way of just solidifying for myself and reminding myself about my why. Why was I doing this? I'll talk a wee bit now about going into hospital. I took my nighties. I took my comfy knickers. I also had some really loose fitting trousers to come home in, just like jogging bottoms, but with a really loose drawstring waist. The advice I'd been given was wear a dress home. I didn't want to wear a dress home, so I made sure I had some trousers that would be comfy. I also took in a couple of little comforting mascot squishmallows. This was such a personal thing, but I wanted something that would make me smile. And these are cute little things, and you can cuddle them and squeeze them, and they're really comforting and sweet. And all the nursing staff who came into my room were like, "Oh, this is so cute," and so they made me smile, and they made other people smile as well. So I felt that was important. I took peppermint tea for post-surgery. And then the other thing that happened once I got into hospital, and this, I suspect I'm not alone in this, and this happens throughout our lives in all sorts of different situations, but I had that thing of having to out myself. It was made easier because I have a female partner, and so I could say my partner, she, and they saw her, and there was just that thing about not wanting to be assumed to be heterosexual, to be straight. My partner was parking the car in the hospital car park, and the car park attendant said, referred to me as her husband. He assumed that she was straight as well and was going to visit her husband, and just things like that where you kind of have to out yourself, and that was hard, because I was in hospital. I was feeling vulnerable. I'm very out in my everyday life. I'm used to having to out myself when I start a new job or meet new people, but there was something about being in a hospital environment, and everybody, all the staff and that were fine, but it was assumed that I was straight, and often assumed that I'd have had kids as well, and I just wish that those assumptions weren't made, and that there was a way that people felt more comfortable about not gendering people until they'd had those pronouns confirmed. So just say they if you don't know. That's what I wanted to say to people. Like, don't say he when you're talking about my partner. If you're not sure, just say they. But as I say, everybody I met was absolutely fine, but I had to do it several times, and it gets tiring and it gets wearing. And as I say, just when I was feeling quite vulnerable in the hospital environment anyway, I didn't want to, but I did. And then it was time for my surgery. So it happened. It happened quite quickly in the end. So the conveyor belt of you get prepped for surgery. I had a cannula put in my arm, and next thing I knew, like, I was in the room about to go in for my surgery. I had asked specifically to see a photo of what they removed from me and to know its weight and dimensions. I kind of felt like I wanted to know that because I wanted to validate my experience. I wanted to prove to myself that it wasn't unexpected, that I wasn't coping with the pain and the discomfort that the fibroid was causing. So I kind of wanted proof and evidence that it was that big and it was causing that much trouble. Even though I knew that for myself, I wanted to see it. And then there was also part of me that kind of wanted to see that it had been, that it was now outside of me. Again, from sort of like an emotional or a psychological perspective, just sort of that confirmation that this part of me has now been removed. It's kind of hard to put into words, but it felt important at the time. So I asked, and they obliged. They took a photo and they weighed and measured the fibroid, and they took the fibroid out with the uterus, so the whole thing. So that's what I got to see. And I guess my top tip for going through the surgery is to be able to comfort yourself if you're feeling anxious. I probably dissociate a little bit before surgery. So I did feel anxious, particularly because I'd had other surgery experiences as well. But I was able to I don't know if this is healthy or not, but I was able to dissociate in a way that meant I just sort of surrendered to the process, with full consent. And I knew what was happening. I knew it was going to happen. I'd informed myself as much as I could. I'd asked the questions. I'd read up. And then there was almost like a feeling of surrender. Okay, I just have to trust. I had sort of done things in advance. So I'd, for work and sort of like financial things, I just made sure that all that stuff was accessible. So if for any reason I wasn't able to manage those things post-surgery, that those could be looked after on my behalf. But after that, it was just a case of surrender and go through with it. I think the surgery itself took about an hour and a half, and then I was in the recovery area. I don't react well to anaesthetic, but I did better this time than previously. It's surgery. It's a lot for your body to go through, and I think just being really aware that it is a lot for your body to go through physically, and it's quite a shock to your body to go through surgery. I think sometimes with keyhole surgery particularly, there's a sense of, it's just keyhole surgery. But a hysterectomy is a major operation. It's removing an organ from your body. And regardless of which method it is removed, it's still a major operation. So I guess just, being really aware of that and being really kind and gentle with yourself is important as well. I was in hospital for 2 days, and then I was discharged. So I had the open surgery. So I had the cut made across my lower belly, bikini line, similar to a cesarean cut. But I had also negotiated with my surgeon that he actually did a lot of the work keyhole. So I also had the small incisions where he'd gone in keyhole to cut everything away, and then what he'd done was he'd made the one big cut under my belly, opened me up and took it all out. The benefit of doing it that way for me was that the length of time when I was opened up was much shorter than if the whole thing had been done through open surgery. So I kind of had like a hybrid of keyhole and open, which meant that I got more scars because I had 3 keyhole incisions plus the big one. But that way worked for me. There goes my cat. And when I came round from surgery, so I had wound dressings on all of those cuts and scars. Had a catheter in, so I think they put the catheter in during surgery, which sounds a bit grim, but was actually such a huge relief because it meant for the first 24 hours I didn't have to worry about getting up to wee. And it also means that they can measure the output of your bladder. After they'd moved removed the catheter as well, they then have to check that your bladder is functioning properly and not retaining fluid. So the ward staff kept a record of all the water liquid I consumed and then how much I weed as well. So they were measuring it all the time. And they were doing ultrasounds on my bladder as well, just to make sure that my bladder was working correctly. And I think that's one of the things that can happen after hysterectomy, is your bladder can go into retention, where basically it doesn't release the urine. But thankfully mine was okay, but they did have to keep a close eye on that. I also have quite low blood pressure, so I was having my blood pressure checked very regularly and having to drink lots of fluid to make sure my blood pressure was okay. Then it was time to come home, and I have to say I was so excited to come home. I'd had enough of the hospital. Everybody was lovely. I was very well looked after, but I was in hospital and I just wanted to be home. I really just wanted to be home. So after 2 nights in hospital, I was discharged. Top tip is to have a pillow in the car that you put between your tummy and the seatbelt. You can get special seatbelt pillows, but I just brought a little pillow from home that I could just tuck between me and the seatbelt. And then the other top tip is, whoever is bringing you home, ask them to drive really carefully, because you will feel every lump and bump and swerve and turn in the road. It's just, everything is so sensitive and sensitized. So just like really careful driving. And I'm doing it now, actually, like holding my stomach, because if you can put some pressure on your tummy, like over the wounds, that just helps feel like a bit more reassuring, because everything, you imagine, like everything's been cut away. There's a lot of, I imagine anyways, like a lot of raw edges, and things aren't where they used to be, and it's just a lot for your body. So this little seatbelt pillow really helped. And then, as I said earlier, I had lots of cushions and props. I got every cushion and pillow in the house, and got them to hand. So whether I was sitting in a chair or whether I was in bed, I just had pillows and props that I could use to try and make myself as comfortable as possible. I did use pain meds for the first couple of weeks. Actually, I'll talk a little bit about medication. So I used the painkillers that had been prescribed for me. They'd also prescribed me some stool softeners, which I took because I'd heard these horror stories of, if you get constipated after a hysterectomy, it can be really, really painful when you eventually poo. So the hospital had given me stool softeners, which I continued to take for about the first 10 days. The other thing I did, top tip, I have these little yoga blocks, and I used those when I went to the loo to put underneath my feet to lift my knees higher, just to adopt like a more comfortable position for having a poo. Like I say, I'd heard these horror stories. I was quite scared that it was going to be really uncomfortable. And the other top tip around that was about breathing. So when you're on the loo, to imagine you're blowing out candles when you're trying to poo, basically. And this stimulates something in your, I don't know, your nervous system or something, which just helps relax the muscles, which allows you to poo if you're feeling anxious about doing it. So, and feet raised, stool softeners, and everything was okay for me, which I'm very grateful for. Things that I struggled with at home: couldn't get my shoes and socks on. I couldn't bend to get my shoes and socks on, so I had to get help with that for the first week and a half, maybe. Sorry, I just had to go and feed my cat. The other thing I found difficult was sleep. I just could not get comfortable in bed. I usually sleep on my side, and I couldn't get onto my side. It was too uncomfortable. Everything just felt too odd. Moving around in bed for the first couple of weeks was painful and difficult. I had a lot of pain around my stitches on my long incision. There was a certain point where every time I went from lying to sitting or sitting to lying, those stitches just felt like they really tugged and were so sore. And so anything that was going to make getting in and out of bed easier felt really important. It didn't actually come up with a good technique. I mean, the physio teaches you, or should teach you, the technique of you roll onto your side, bring your knees up, and sort of as you drop your knees over the side of the bed, you use that as a counterlever to then bring your body up. You'll find videos and little drawings showing you how to do that. And the physio had got me to practice it before I had the surgery. But nothing prepares you for the way your body's going to feel. And again, I think this is probably going to be very individual, depending on how your body's felt before surgery as well. You know, how able-bodied are you, how mobile are you beforehand as well. So getting in and out of bed was uncomfortable, painful at times. Sleep was difficult, and so to make that easier for myself, I had a little sort of nighttime set up. I had a bed in the spare room, so I wasn't disturbing my partner. I had a thermos of hot water and a cup with a peppermint tea. I could make myself, which meant I could make myself a cup of tea in the night if I needed it, if I needed to, if I was awake and I needed something soothing. I had my pain meds up there in case I needed them through the night. I had my phone and a power pack so I could, you know, look through social media or read something on my phone if I wanted. I actually found my concentration for the first couple of weeks wasn't that great. So although I'd prepared, you know, I'd got books and all sorts of things that I thought I was going to read, I didn't have the concentration capacity to do that. So in some ways it was easier just to sort of flick at things on my phone or, just to listen to something. Those were probably the hardest things. I'm very grateful and I'm very aware that I was in a position where I have a partner at home who was able to help. So she was able to help me put my shoes and socks on and get dressed. She was able to help make meals and bring me cups of tea and all of those kind of things. She was able to, one of the things that I was keen to do was get out for a walk every day, which in the first few days was just like a slow shuffle down the road, but she was around to come out with me because I didn't feel very confident going on my own. I was just really scared that something was going to hurt, or if I tripped, would I be able to get myself up off the ground, like those kind of things. Just in those first couple of weeks, so having somebody come out with me was really helpful until I built my confidence, and then I would go for walks on my own. I say walks, I mean it was literally up and down our street for the first few weeks, just up and down, just while I built up my stamina and my confidence, and while the pain receded. And just it's just a weird feeling. Like my belly just felt really weird, heavy, and like everything was just dragging down for the first couple of weeks. So I had to go gently with the physical activity. The other thing I did pretty much every day was have an afternoon nap for the first few weeks. I was really resistant to it. But everybody had said to me, you must listen to your body. Like that was the top advice, listen to your body. And so when my body said, I need to go and lie down, I need to have a nap, I gave myself permission to do that. It was kind of non-negotiable a lot of the time, but just really listening to your body and really paying attention to what your body needs. So silly things like after a couple of weeks, I was like, I can chop some vegetables in the kitchen, and oh my gosh, it was so tiring. It was just so tiring and made me feel really sore. So then it's like, okay, maybe I should sit down and chop the vegetables, or maybe the act of chopping was actually like just too much pressure to put through my body. Maybe there's something I can do that's gentler or easier. There's all kind of advice about how much you can lift and carry and bend and do. And again, I would say go with the advice that's given to you by your surgeon and physiotherapist, nursing staff, but also listen to your body about what actually feels good. I had a bit of a standing joke, which was every time I did too much, and I was like, I've done too much, like I've made myself sore or I've made myself exhausted. And I'd say, but in my defence, this is the first time I've had a hysterectomy. Like, I don't know how much I can do until I try it, and then I discover if it was too much or not. So that was kind of my approach. I said to myself that every day is a healing day. That was kind of my mantra. So even on the days when I didn't feel like I was making much progress, or I didn't feel that great, I just said to myself, every day is a healing day. And I also reminded myself that healing is not linear. So you don't heal by the same amount every day. Like some days I felt like I'd made huge progress, and then I might like 2 steps forward, and then I might feel a step back or plateau. But every day is a healing day. Healing is not linear. It takes the time it takes. And to support myself with this, I'd made myself a journal. And in this, I was recording. So I was recording practical things like when did I have my medication, and when was my next dose due. I was also recording things like how was I feeling emotionally. I was recording things like how far or for how long did I walk today? Was that more than yesterday? How did it feel? Those kind of things. So I was sort of keeping a record of my progress. I also had in my journal it's like a daily gratitude, something I'm grateful for, and what's today's small victory. Those were the things I wrote about, just to kind of keep myself psychologically optimistic about my progress. And my healing has been pretty straightforward, but it hasn't been linear. So there have been times when it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I reckon that it took me, I think this is very individual, 12 weeks. So I had in my head 8 weeks that I would be back to normal by 8 weeks, and I wasn't. I was doing really well, but I felt a real shift again at 12 weeks. And some advice I heard from somebody else was, if you give yourself a year and then use that as the measure. So when I was saying, it's 6 weeks and I'm still not able to blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, 6 weeks as a proportion of a year is nothing. Like that, I'm doing really well for 6 weeks. And 12 weeks as a proportion of a year, 3 months, I'm doing really well for 12 weeks. I think you do just have to give it the time it needs, and not assume that everything is going to be fine really quickly. Although that might be your experience, because again, when I was looking around for other people's stories, it's so individual. So some people after 4 weeks, they're back to driving, they're back to work, they're back to doing all their daily stuff. I wasn't able to do that. After 4 weeks, I could get my shoes and socks on. I could walk for about 20-25 minutes at a slow pace. I was making my own cups of tea, and I could make meals. But I wasn't doing much more. I was doing some writing, because that's work for me, but it's also hobby and pleasure. So yeah, it takes the time it takes. Every day is a healing day, and I made my own journal with the things that I wanted to record and write about, because again, I couldn't find one which felt applicable to me. So either they were all quite womanly, girly, or just very generic, and more sort of like health and wellbeing journals rather than hysterectomy recovery specific. So I have actually turned my journal format into a journal that I'm now making available to other people as well. So if that sounds like something that could be helpful for you, again, I'll pop a link in it with this video. And just on that note, I do have some other writing around hysterectomy, which I'll put links to. The other things, I guess, I do want to talk about sex. Oops, there goes my cat. I didn't want to know when can I have sex again. I wanted to know when will it be okay for me to have an orgasm. And this was another like difference that I found in the cis-het material. So the question always seemed to be, when can I have sex? And that question translated to, when is it okay for my male partner to penetrate me, or for me to receive penetration? But my question for my body and my sex life was, when is it going to be okay? When is it going to feel good to have an orgasm? I was, again, anxious. I was worried it was going to hurt, or that I could damage something. That if I had an orgasm and I might like pull something or rupture something or injure something. I waited 6 weeks and then I masturbated to check how everything was feeling and how it was working. And that was good. It was a positive experience. And so, but I actually waited 12 weeks before my partner and I had sex together. Partly because I was building up my confidence, partly because I just wasn't feeling in the mood. I masturbated during that time just to sort of, as an act of self-care, as a way of keeping things ticking over and giving myself some pleasure, reuniting with my body as a site of pleasure after everything it had been through. And again, I think, everybody, the definition of sex varies for different people. For some people that is penetration, for some people it's external stimulation, for some people it involves orgasms, for some people it doesn't involve orgasms. It's very individual and variable, and I just wanted to know that my body could orgasm, and that I could experience pleasure through sexual touch. Like, that was key for me. And again, I saw my surgeon at 7 weeks post-op as my sort of 7-week checkup. I said, is it okay for me to have sex? He said, yes. I said, is it okay for me to go swimming? He said, yes. And those were like the two of the key things that I wanted to know was okay to do. But I then waited longer than that, 7 weeks, before I did both of those things. So I waited about 14 weeks before I went swimming. Felt, oh my gosh, so much stretch in my torso, swimming after that. And then I waited about 12 weeks before I had sex with another person. So there we go. Other things, going back to work, going back to driving. So I kind of had worked the whole way through, because I was creating a book, and I had been creating a book for the last year called Sex Meets Life, which is all about what happens to our sex lives when life happens. It's a collection of stories from all different writers, writing about things like menopause, aging, illness, surgery, bereavement, gender transition, coming out in all sorts of different ways, it's a wonderful collection of stories, and that book was due out just a few weeks after my surgery, so I was still working on getting that book out, but I didn't go back to pay, my job, my paid job, until about 9 weeks post-surgery, and I did find it tiring. So yeah, I think that was one of the things I wasn't quite prepared for, was just how tired and fatigued I was quite a lot of the time. Gets better. Yeah, and then going back to driving, I think the usual rules are you can go back to driving when you feel that you can do an emergency stop safely. So again, that's a very individual thing. And then I've also been, the stage I'm at now, looking more into physiotherapy and different exercises to help with my core, to help with my lower back, just to get myself back to functioning fitness that I had lost over the last year, because I had because of the pain, and because, as I said earlier, about not being able to leave the house for too long without, there was a loo around. I'm also having to look after my scar. It's healing really well. I'm very proud of my body for how well it's healed. But yeah, so looking after that scar tissue as well. So this is quite a long video. I hope it's been helpful. I think my top tips are: listen to your body. Find a balance for yourself between being and doing. I found it really hard to rest. That's me personally. I found it really hard to kind of like sit and watch telly and that kind of thing. I wish I'd done more of that. But actually I did what I could. Yeah, and I think my recovery's gone well, given everything I did do. But in hindsight, I think I would have given myself permission just to take it easier in those first few weeks than I did. I hope your surgery, if you're having a hysterectomy, goes really well. I hope your recovery goes really well. I feel relieved and liberated post-surgery. I feel like I can open my life up again. I feel like I can get back to the life that I want to be living, rather than this sort of like small version that my life had become. I also feel really passionate about this representation, about creating resources and information for lesbians and queer people, so that our stories and our experiences can be shared as well. And I feel grateful for all the information and support that I did receive from straight resources as well. So it's not that there's anything wrong with them, it's just that we have hysterectomies too.